I'm Tom Moran from the Star-Ledger editorial board. I have Phil Murphy, the Democratic candidate for governor, with me, who has submitted to yet another tooth drilling from the Star-Ledger editorial board. His opponent, Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno, has refused to visit, which is the first candidate for governor ever to refuse to come in here except Chris Christie.
Wow. Okay.
So let's start. Some people, including me, are nervous about electing someone with no political experience in governing. Career mostly on Wall Street. So let me ask you this. Do you consider John Corzine a successful governor?
Oh, so listen, first of all, it's good to be here. I'll leave John Corzine to the historians for a moment and say the following. I spent probably 2 years kicking the tires before we made the decision to officially run for governor. And I spent probably 80 or 90% of those 2 years trying to understand what the issues were facing the state and how well I matched up in terms of my life experience with what we needed to do to fix this state. And it's a state that's in crisis, particularly in the economy. And I concluded that I felt that I had the requisite skill sets. Everything from the way I grew up, which was working poor, to business experience, seeing models, good and bad, around the world of how you create jobs, to deep experience in a series of nonprofits that have real relevance in the state. So an organization that deals with women who are victims of domestic violence, National Board of the NAACP, chaired when you and I first met the original Commission on Pension and Healthcare Benefits, co-chaired a national task force for public education. So I felt, with humility, so I'm not patting myself on the back, but you got to ask yourself, look in the mirror, does the match make sense? Having said that, and I think it does, because the big issue for us is the economy. It's not growing, it's not fair, it doesn't touch enough people. Having said that, I've never governed in Trenton, and it is one of the principal guiding reasons why the first and only selection we've made so far is Sheila Oliver as lieutenant governor, who's got 30 plus years in addition to her own personal education and life pedigree, 30 plus years of local, county, statewide government. Someone this morning literally just came out of a meeting where someone said, you know, this kind of reminds us of Barack Obama picking Joe Biden. And I can't carry either of their bags, but I would say it does have that element to it. As for John, he's a friend. I think his progressive heart was in the right place. He got hit with the worst recession in the history of the state. But again, I'll leave him his tenure to the historians. I feel very comfortable with where I am right now.
And I should add that Sheila was the speaker in the assembly, so she was the leading. How about naming possible cabinet members or chief of staff to reassure voters who share the same concern I have?
Yeah, we're not taking anything for granted, Tom, in the sense that we're running morning, noon, and night to try to win the election. So that's job number one. But as we also feel like would be abrogating our responsibility. I would think the lieutenant governor would feel the same way, that if you do win this thing and they hand you the car keys, you have something better than a hum and a hum and a hum moment, that you've actually started to think this through. And we have modestly, but there's no question, experience, competence, diversity are three words that drive us. That's driven me pretty much in all walks of my life. But if your question is, could we expect to see other appointments if we're fortunate enough to win that look like Sheila Oliver, somebody who's been around a long time, has seen this? The answer is yes. I think the answer is resoundingly yes.
I mean, I'm hearing some names that are encouraging and wonder why you wouldn't say, look, I don't know if I'm going to win, but if I do, here's my guy as chief of staff or head of transition and all that sort of thing.
We are likely not going to do that, just because we're focused so much on trying to win this thing. And you and I have talked about this before. How many elections, including 2 last year, the British election in the EU and Hillary Clinton for president, did we think we're 18 days out? Did we think we're set in stone? And they weren't. So we're not going to see that movie again.
Yes, that hasn't stopped column writers from being cocky about predictions, but I can understand from your...
100% respect that.
So let's talk about sanctuary cities. Guadagno's running a very tough TV ad about the schoolyard shootings in Newark a decade ago, in which, as most of us remember, 4 kids were gunned down by gang members for no reason. 3 of them killed, a 4th severely injured. Turned out one of the killers was an undocumented immigrant who had earlier been arrested for child rape and was released on bail. She's suggesting you might repeat that mistake.
Yeah.
Would you?
Boy, The answer is no, and I think her ad is, you talk about in politics below the belt. I mean, this is, somebody said this, not me, but somebody said this is at least in Willie Horton territory. You've seen the ad, you've written about it. She splices answers from me that were, in fact, I think I was sitting with you and Matt Arco for part of it, talking about a general discussion, if not specific, to Dreamers. So she's crossed wires, and she's got a law enforcement background, so I would say a little bit shame on her. She should know better. She's crossed wires like law enforcement and immigration policy. She's crossed a wire between immigrants generally, or Dreamers specifically, and criminals. And she's, it's more of the, I know it's a broken record, but it's more of the us versus them piece of this. So what I've said is, listen, and I've spoken to law enforcement both after our discussion, before our first debate and after that debate, and reinforce the notion that if we are a welcoming, that seems to be a word that people feel more comfortable with, but if you've got a community, regardless of what you call it, if folks are confident enough to come out of the shadows and be in the sunlight, engaging with other members and residents in the community, and importantly with law enforcement and community leadership, you'll have a safer community. And that's why I feel strongly that whatever we call it, that should be our objective.
Well, so last time we spoke, you hadn't made a decision on this. I wonder if you have since. Under New Jersey rules today, police on the street cannot check immigration status of witnesses or victims or people seeking help. So the idea, as you say, is not to force the illegal community into the underground. Right. So you make this. But after an arrest is made for a serious crime, they must check the immigration status and notify the feds if that suspect is undocumented. That's current rules in New Jersey, passed under Corzine. Do you support that policy?
I have to tell you, I come down on the side of law enforcement, and I feel strongly about that. I feel like we should let law enforcement do its job. And if somebody's committed a crime as heinous as that crime that was committed, they should be, the book should be thrown at them. But they should go to jail forever and a day, whatever it is, and then they should be deported out of the country.
Excuse me, but I don't get an answer there. After an arrest is for a serious crime, they check the immigration status and notify the feds if they're undocumented. Is that what you're saying you support?
I am of the opinion we should let law enforcement take its full extent of its process.
They would be free on the local level to decide whether or not to do that, in other words?
I think they should be. I think they should be.
Okay.
I think, but again,
you might repeat that mistake then. You might have a local department let out an undocumented who had committed a serious crime.
Well, I think if we let law enforcement do its job and somebody's committed a crime, they're going to have to pay the consequences for that, regardless of their immigration status. That's one of those wires that has gotten crossed, which again, I think she's done it deliberately because this is an us versus them mentality. Let's law enforcement deal with this in the way law enforcement would deal with it.
Okay.
I feel strongly about that.
You are a full-throated, moving on. You're a full-throated liberal proposing a long list of new spending initiatives, but you'll be taking office during a fiscal crisis. Are you over-promising?
I don't think so, Tom. I mean, I feel like we've been very buttoned down in our sort of fiscal mindset, and I would say that I'm dealing with somebody who not only says whatever seems to be convenient, but I don't think there's more than gimmickry on the other side of this. So we've been pretty darn clear about sources and uses of money. We have to grow this economy again. We have to unwind the incredibly favorable tax treatment that the very wealthiest big corporations and hedge funds have gotten over the past almost 8 years. And hopefully a growing economy and unwinding that treatment, we can plow all of that back into the middle class and meet our obligations. So that's, the above the line numbers that you and I have talked about in particular are fully funding public education and making the steps as fast as possible toward meeting our pension obligations.
That is the same, the growing economy theory is the same one that Kim Godano is citing to fund her property tax relief plan, and it never materializes, the history seems to show. But let's go to your top priorities, our pension, school funding, and a down payment at least to $100 million on transportation.
Yes.
Right? And your tax cut of $1.3 billion a year, roughly 1/4 the size of Corzine's, will cover most but not all of that, according to your own policy people, right?
Correct.
What about the rest? Free tuition at community college, a boost to higher ed, buy foreclosed homes and create affordable housing, daycare subsidies, tax breaks for the working poor, vocational problem. This is the sort of broader liberal vision you're bringing.
Yep.
So let's say 2 years passes and you've been unable to offer free tuition at community college. Is that a broken promise, or are you expressing all these as hopes if things go well?
I think we've been very clear. So let me roll the tape back. On the list, and I'm not sure it was in your package or not, so forgive me, we will pursue legalization of marijuana. That won't be overnight, but we think very conservatively you can leg into sort of 300 million or more, and people think I'm wildly conservative. I was counting that in the 1.3 billion.
Okay. That covers your top priorities. That longer list of liberal ambitions is what I'm asking about.
I think I've been very clear, and I think it has been very much framed. Growth in our economy will allow us to achieve the degree to which we can achieve all of our aspirations. So I think our answer, and by the way, I'm an optimist on growing the economy. Just because we haven't grown it before doesn't mean we have the right leadership that knew how to grow it. So, and I don't want to get into a long song and dance, but we're leaving tens of billions of dollars of economic activity on the table. We think between 20 and 50 billion, just compared to an average American state, that's $2 to $3 billion of state revenue a year. And community college, free community college, is $200 million. We think now at most. So that's, let's say it's $2 billion. That's less than 10% of more latitude you got. That would allow you then to leg in to a more expensive initiative. You mentioned universal pre-K. That's a lot more money. You can't do that overnight. You've got to get the economy stabilized and growing. That's probably $600 million. That's something you can, again, phase in, assuming you have that growth. But again, if I'm right, and our math says we are, you've left $20 to $50 billion of economic activity on the table. That's $2 to $3 billion in state revenue. Boy, that's a lot of latitude. So I don't think it's a broken promise, because we've been quite clear. This is sort of, there's a line, there's a benchmark of stuff above it, and then we're gonna grow this economy again, and we're gonna get as fast as possible to the other initiatives.
Okay, we have much more, but there's a start.